A very good morning to you, Grenada, and the rest of the world. It is Monday morning, start of a brand new week here in the Spice Isle. It is the seventh day, believe it or not, seventh day, first week gone, 2019. Thanks for joining us this morning, whether you're on Facebook or one of the other platforms around the world. Nice to see you guys this morning. Got an interesting program. I think we're going to run the full hour this morning, actually. And those of you who joined us yesterday will have heard some of what's going to be heard this morning. But I thought we would run it again because there was some interesting stuff said on yesterday's edition of Sundays with George Grant, and I believe worth repeating. So, first of all, we're going to take a look at the Grenada Bar Association. Yes, sir. They are taking protest action today. The Bar Association is saying to the government of Grenada, enough is enough. So we're going to play you a segment with the president of the Bar Association, which we aired yesterday morning. You also have the national report to look forward to this morning as well. Find out what our government's doing on our behalf. And final segment this morning deals with something which was also heard and seen yesterday morning as Bishop Harvey opened up his heart to Grenada. You know, based on the feedback I've been getting since we aired that segment yesterday, he struck a chord. He struck a chord. So, that's what's coming your way this morning on the Monday edition of Good Day Grenada. Let's get right into it. Because of the protest action by the Grenada Bar Association, which gets underway, hey, probably right about now, Monday morning, I'm going to begin today's program with a segment from yesterday's edition of Sundays with George Grant. I had a visit from the president of the Grenada Bar Association, Lisa Taylor, and I asked her to explain why we are seeing the action being taken by our lawyers today. Here's a clip.
It has been in the public domain since September that the bar gave the government, I don't like the word ultimatum, but a deadline, the 31st of December, to provide us with court facilities. Again, in the context that the courts in Grenada, high courts, shut down entirely in May of last year and began functioning after a fashion on or about 22nd October. And the after a fashion, I mean, is that we are working with one criminal court and we are working with a temporary part-time civil court. And I say part-time because the civil court is in the Parliament building, and obviously whenever Parliament needs its building, the court cannot sit. That has been our reality in the current dispensation. So in the light of that deadline, when I came to you the last time, I think I already, and the bar already knew that the deadline would not be met, because we have been involved very actively in whatever the government has been trying to achieve as far as meeting our requests. So I think in anticipation of that, when the bar last met on the 4th of December, a decision was taken that, listen, we pretty much know the 31st of December will meet us in much the same conditions. And so after that deadline passes, we have to give some indication to the government that it's not business as usual in relation to this issue, that we're not prepared to simply wait the usual pace of government, which has demonstrated itself in the last few months in the following ways. The public would recall that when that demand was made by the Bar Association, that something concrete happened by the 31st of December, that at the same time there was a statement made that the government was well advanced, or plans were well advanced. I can't remember the exact wording, but the clear impression was that something of a serious nature was being undertaken by the government.
Stop for a minute, because a press release came out on Friday, and I want to quote part of that press release from
Sure,
government.
no problem.
Okay. The Grenada government is continuing to work assiduously to address the housing of civil and criminal courts and other matters affecting the legal fraternity. Government was made aware Friday of plans by the Grenada Bar Association to protest the state of affairs with the local courts and to call on governments to come up with an urgent plan to comprehensively address the issues. Minister of Legal Affairs, Honorable Kendra Mathurin-Stewart, has indicated that government has had discussions with the Grenada Bar Association and is taking all steps to find solutions to the existing problems. She elaborated further, saying, efforts are being made to secure a building to house the courts while government pursues a long-term solution to accommodate issues. We hope to conclude negotiations on the acquisition of a building in the next few weeks.
Right. Okay. I hear that. We don't accept it. Exhibit A. When we were told back in September that the government was, I think probably the same words may have been used, assiduously, determinedly, whatever the words used, giving the clear impression that a serious, meaningful effort was in process to acquire a building so that we would be in a position to house all the courts in one space and await the promised Hall of Justice, however long that would take. It's much the same language we heard. And what has happened? In relation to the acquisition of that building, we are told that the government of Grenada allowed itself to be outbid by a credit union. I want that to sink in. The government of Grenada allowed itself to be outbid by a credit union in relation to the acquisition of that building. Now, any reasonable person hearing that could only conclude that the government was not truly serious in its pledge to acquire that building for the stated purpose. Not even the largest credit union, I might add, and I'll say no more on that, but intelligent thinking person can read into that development and take something from it. A clear demonstration of the lack of seriousness of the government. And you know, the genesis of this is that the government has never acknowledged and accepted and articulated that we are in a crisis. When you listen to the language, when you listen to this recent press release, when you listen to every utterance coming from the government, you get the impression that this is just one of the several problems of governance that have to be contended with. But we have consistently maintained, and that's part of the solution, owning up and recognizing the degree of the problem. The press release that we submitted for the public scrutiny articulates very clearly why we use the word crisis. Because in this dispensation, the crisis has been brought to a head because we simply do not have court facilities. And we can use the time frame of May to now, but we can go beyond that. We can consider that we are in the 15th year since the courthouse was destroyed. Yes? And I want us to consider that and really question whether assiduous efforts are truly being made. In the current dispensation, and I make no apology for saying this, the Grenada Bar Association has practically had to hold the hand of government in the efforts that have been made so far. And I want to make it categorically clear. It is the role of the government, it is the job and responsibility of the government, not the Grenada Bar, to provide a court for the state of Grenada. We will support any effort. We will cooperate. Our cooperation has been lauded as far as Parliament, and that is fine. What are we getting for our cooperation? What we are getting is that from May to January, we're still hearing press releases from the government talking about efforts and assiduous efforts and the rest. And how do you measure whether those efforts are really true and genuine? I've given you Exhibit A. Exhibit B. I sat and I listened as the rest of Grenada would have listened. And I want to make it clear, the Minister of Legal Affairs is my professional colleague, friend, and in fact, the neighbor. Her former chambers are right next door to mine. So this is nothing personal. But I have to state the facts. I listened to the budget presentation from our Minister of Legal Affairs. I actually came into it late. And I sat and I listened, and I was very happy for all the wonderful things that were happening for the people of Carriacou, because that's what I heard. And at a point in time, I heard a warning bell. And from my experience, in the context of budget or other presentations in Parliament, when you receive a warning bell from the Speaker, it is an indication that you are very near the end of your address. So, whereas I thought perhaps I may have missed the pronouncements relative to the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the judicial system in Grenada, what I heard was that when that warning bell was sounded, the minister announced that she would turn now to speak about her ministry, which confounded me. So I sat and I listened, and I heard some talk about the excellent legislative progress and agenda that had been met, all well and good. And in the dying stages of that address, I heard talk about the efforts that were being made. It was the first time I heard, I don't know if I missed it earlier, an acknowledgement that we had a problem in Grenada. And this was a presentation, I believe, in December. A problem that had reached a crisis situation since May of that year. And what were we told? Efforts are being made. The bar is cooperating, which is true, and we will continue to cooperate. I've made it very clear. We'll continue to do anything meaningful. We'll continue to talk. I will unhappily have to continue going to meetings and all the rest. But in the light of those two exhibits, we have good cause to question the seriousness of the government as far as addressing that we have a critical... I make the point again. We cannot continue to trumpet development in Grenada while the judicial arm of government is literally lying on the ground. I don't care by what measure we are growing and developing. I don't care what the economic data will tell us. But when your judicial arm is lying on the ground, and this has been a steady march of years, to the point where we do not have adequate court facilities in Grenada, we cannot speak about development. And this is something that is affecting everybody. So when you see lawyers out there tomorrow, the lawyers are not out there for themselves. Yes, this is our livelihood. We need to have courts to be able to ply our trade, as it were. But why are we in those courts? Because we are advancing the causes of our clients, the men, women, and children of Grenada. So when we begin to accept as normal that you file a claim and it must take you 3, 5, and 7 years, something has gone terribly wrong. These are issues that are affecting people in their daily lives, right? People in the sense of individuals and people in the sense of companies and businesses who also have issues before the courts that they want to conclude. Yes? So I want people to be clear that when we stand up together, and I say here to all the lawyers, I think I speak the obvious, this is an issue that cuts across any particular divide there may be. This is an issue that affects every single lawyer in Grenada, both at the private bar and at the public bar. In the case of the public bar, recall that when we were functioning with 2 criminal courts, you were still hearing in the public domain statements made about the state of our assizes and the backlog. Now think about that. 2 criminal courts operating full-time, and you still hear from time to time either the DPP or somebody from the prosecutorial department lamenting the fact that we were trying to reduce a tremendous backlog in the criminal assizes. What do you think is happening now that we have 1 court? Imagine that. What do you think is happening now that for the last several months we have been functioning with 1 criminal court? Where do you think that backlog would stand? Right? So my clear message to the lawyers of Grenada, who are well aware that this is an issue that affects all of us, is that the time has come where we don't sit in our offices any longer and call the president of the bar and complain. I can tell you categorically, George, practically since I've taken on this position, every day I have to hear complaints relating to this issue and others from lawyers. The time has come to stand up. The time has come to send a clear message. Regardless of what we believe in our private pursuits, this cuts across the spectrum. And we must stand together and send a clear signal that while we will continue to cooperate, we want to insist that something other than the usual pace of government, which is what we've been seeing on this issue, must be brought to bear. That this thing there must be a reckoning. Yes? We must accept that we are in a crisis situation. And when you have a crisis, you can't approach the solution to a crisis in the way that you would any ordinary problem. Yes? So what the bar wants to do is to signal that the deadline, because this is a catalyst for this particular action. We gave you a deadline. The deadline has passed. We can't just sit back and continue to wait and fold our arms. That has brought us nothing meaningful. We will stand together and send a signal. And in doing so, I can assure you, this is a message that resonates throughout the Caribbean. It doesn't give me any comfort that this may be a problem that is repeated to some degree in other Caribbean islands. It resonates because I think, not just in Grenada, but as a Caribbean region, we have to come to terms with the significance of the judicial arm of government, of the judiciary, and that when we neglect it, there are dire consequences for our societies. And we cannot continue to treat this issue as business as usual, which is why the Bar Association has to react in a way that we are doing. And this is the beginning. We are considering all options, including legal options, to force this issue to be dealt with in a serious, meaningful, timely way. Tomorrow, it's effectively a gathering of the lawyers. We are not, and I want to make this clear, this is not an event of bacchanalia.
You're not marching from
This
Queen's
is not
Park to dancing.
an event of bacchanalia. We are a bar association. We simply want to say to the government, look at us here. We stand together, united on this common issue and concern, and we say to you with a united voice, we want you to do your jobs and do it with a sense of urgency and seriousness. So we will gather together in the most appropriate place. On the last occasion when perhaps, if you're old enough, you might remember the bar having to take a step of this nature. We stopped going to court. That was our way to signal our indignation about the issue of that time. We stopped going to court for a time. We can't even do that in this instance. Which court are we going to walk out of? Parliament is not, we're taking a cotch, as the people say in Parliament. It's not our court. Yes? We are going to be in the environs of the registry. And in those environs, if anybody chooses to come with a camera, you can sweep your camera over to York House, which is the genesis of this problem in its current dispensation, 2004. And you can look to see what that means for the statements you hear from government. And then you can swing your camera across to the registry, and you can walk upstairs, and if you dare, and you can see illustrated some of the things we have been saying. And you can swing your cameras across and look at the building where the prosecutorial department still has to do its job, which is also in need of some urgent attention. So these are not things that we're not being, I've been at pains to say, this is not about lawyers being fastidious or difficult. When Ivan came in 2004, we rolled up our sleeves, all of us. We soldiered through. We attended courts in buildings that were causing problems for people's health. We went back to our court building that we knew had mold and recently has been certified scientifically, confirming what we always feared. We went to the building they sent us to at Rowley House when we could no longer attend there, even though the steps were challenging for some of our clients and people were suffering adverse effects because of mold. We went to the building down at the Carnage. In other words, we have soldiered through. We have done our part. We have kept our part of the bargain. We have done what but there comes a time when, there's a term I like to use, we can no longer continue to institutionalize, to be complicit in institutionalizing mediocrity. That is what has been happening. We accept as normal the most mediocre conditions and standards for an arm of government that is as important as the executive and the legislature. And we can't continue to do that. And so that is as much as I can tell you about the context of this protest tomorrow. As I say, there'll be no carnival marches and there'll be no placards, but we simply are taking a stand together as a bar and letting the message go out that we are not prepared to simply cross our arms and wait and wait and continue to wait while our livelihoods are affected, while our clients' business not being served, and while the public of Grenada continues to suffer through this crisis. Something more has to be done.
Okay, there you go. The lady's name is Lisa Taylor, and she is the president of the Grenada Bar Association. And you saw just how passionate she is. As we speak right now, I expect that they're down at the registry. So if you see a bunch of lawyers standing around in the parking lot out there, that's why. Yes. Let us now turn to Facebook for just a minute here. Say good morning to some of the folks who are out there. Ronald McPhail, Alexander, Ryan Jaban, Lori Bridgman. They're all saying a very good morning to those of you joining us. And by the way, remember to like and share the live, okay? We want everybody to see what's being said here this morning. Margaret says, good morning, everyone. So, is protest and marching, or does protest and marching mean engaging in bacchanalia? Just asking. So says Margaret. And she's referring to a comment that was made by Lisa there a few minutes ago. And by the way, Margaret, thank you very much. I think it's the first time I've seen the word bacchanalia in print, written. So thank you for showing me how you spell bacchanalia. B-A-C-C-H-A-N-A-L-I-A. Can always rely on you. Lydia James saying, good morning, Grenada. Stand firm. You know, folks, they're standing firm. And I'll tell you, for those of you who have been following developments here over the past couple of weeks, not couple of weeks, past couple of months, you know that not only are the lawyers standing firm, but the trade unions are also standing firm. Keep your eyes open. This week you probably going to be hearing about some developments. Ryan Jaban says, sadly, ma'am, mediocrity reigns supreme in our Grenada. Yep, Ryan, she did mention that. Yeah. Well, it looks like more and more people are standing up and saying enough is enough. Now, that's good to stand up. But let's also see what actions those who are yakking out there are going to take. These folks can't do it on their own, okay? But at least they have had the intestinal fortitude to stand up. Now, Ryan says he loves that word, bacchanalia. Okay, I'll tell you what. It's now 23, coming up on 24 minutes after 9 o'clock. Chiming in here now on Facebook. Kind of late, Fitzroy, but good to see you. He's saying good morning, and here we go again. Yeah, kind of sad, isn't it, Fitzroy? Kind of sad. That's the Grenada we live in. But you know what? That's an opportunity for us to make a big change this year. If this commiss wasn't happening, there wouldn't be any need to do anything, you know, just go about your daily routine. But Grenada is being presented with another opportunity. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. Let me take my first little break here, and then the GIS. But I want to remind you folks that after the GIS, you thought Lisa was powerful there? You're going to be hearing from Bishop Clyde Harvey as he spoke with me. We aired it yesterday, but it was actually recorded on Saturday afternoon. Open disclosure here, okay? I have to be honest with you. So yeah, let's take our first little break and we'll come on back.
Together with you, our customers, we energize our community.
Together with you, we energize our economy. We are working together to give our nation a better tomorrow.
With you, we energize our future. Together, we energize our nation.
Thank you for partnering with us as we energize our Spice Island.
Redleg, energizing our Grenada.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try their sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
With free island-wide delivery, Hubbard's Building Supplies and Lumber Departments continue to provide the best quality lumber, steel, tiles, plumbing materials, electrical and general hardware supplies at competitive prices. We continually consult with builders, homeowners and contractors to improve product range and services. Enjoy discounts where applicable, including the use of credit and debit cards. At Hubbard's Building Supplies, Grandance and Lumber Department, Caranage, we offer quality service, affordable prices, giving you the convenient, reliable, free island-wide delivery. Call 440-2087 for all your home improvement and building solutions.
Grenadian General Insurance Company, strength and stability. Grenadian General Insurance Company, tell your friends, tell your family. We cover householders comprehensive, motor and even fire too. Contractors all risk burglary, public liability, professional indemnity, directors liability, and wait, we still have more. Come and find out more what you're waiting for.
We are located on Scott Street, St. George's. For more information, call 440-2434.
Okay, folks, I'll tell you what, there's a quick note here on the bottom of this Facebook page here. It says, from Ryan, he says, he loves listening to Bishop Clive Harvey. You're not the only one, Ryan. Every time this man speaks, I actually find the time to listen to him because there's always a takeaway, if you will, from what he says. Might remember just towards the end of last year, he intervened in the impasse between the unions and government. Then again, for his Christmas message, another profound address. And on Saturday afternoon, I picked up my smartphone, went down, sat in his living room there with him, and had this. It was not a chat. It was not an interview. I just said, Bish, open up your heart. You have some airtime. Look into this camera. And just talk to the Grenadian people. He did just that. Well, I'll tell you what, I want you to hang in there because in just a few minutes after we bring you the national report, you're going to hear Bishop Harvey, and you're not going to forget it. Here we go with the GIS.
Government invites trade unions to continue pension negotiations. Details to this story and more in the national report. With the details to the news for Friday, January 4th, 2019, I am Rakisha St. Louis. The Government's Pension Engagement Committee has invited public sector trade unions and staff associations to continue pension negotiations next Friday, January 11th. The request for the continuation of talks was relayed in a letter sent Friday by the chairman of the committee, Honorable Oliver Joseph, to the unions and staff associations. In his letter, the chairman reiterated that the 1958 formula for calculating gratuity, which is 25% by the full pension multiplied by 5.5 years, is unaffordable and unsustainable. Notwithstanding that fact, the chairman said government remains open to considering all other options to reach an amicable settlement. Friday's letter to the unions and staff associations included a proposed agenda which lists the final agreement and sign-off on the draft negotiation protocol, discussion and agreement on the age of retirement, and the continuation of negotiations on the advanced payment of pension or gratuity. The last meeting between the committee and the unions and staff associations was held on December 14, 2018. The letter from the chairman seeking the continuation of pension negotiations comes on the heels of statements from the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell, in which he reaffirmed the government's commitment to bringing a speedy and lasting resolution to the pension negotiations. In his New Year's message, the Prime Minister urged the unions and staff associations to work with government to achieve a realistic, fair, affordable and sustainable resolution. The Grenada government is continuing to work assiduously to address the housing of civil and criminal courts and other matters affecting the legal fraternity. Government was made aware Friday of plans by the Grenada Bar Association to protest the state of affairs with the local courts and to call on government to come up with an urgent plan to comprehensively address the issues. Minister for Legal Affairs Honourable Kendra Mathurin Stewart has indicated that government has had discussions with the Grenada Bar Association and is taking all steps to find solutions to the existing problems. Minister Mathurin Stewart elaborated further, saying, efforts are being made to secure a building to house the courts while government pursues a long-term solution to accommodation issues. We hope to conclude negotiations on the acquisition of a building in the next few weeks. Minister Mathurin Stewart has also indicated that an attempt is being made to address problems at the registry, which has been at the center of several complaints. She added that they have employed someone within the registry who can assist with resolving some of the problems we now face. We expect to see a reduction in complaints over time as we continue to make improvements in the service provided. Another solution being pursued by government is the creation of a mechanism that will facilitate constant engagement with the legal fraternity on relevant matters to minimize any future dissatisfaction on the operation of the legal system. Minister Mathurin Stewart said, government recognizes the urgency of the situation in which we find ourselves, but rest assured we are doing all in our power to find solutions. Our court represents a critical pillar of our society and economy, and we are committed to supporting the full functionality of the legal system. This is the National Report. We'll have more news after the break.
We're back with you to continue the work. We need you to improve our Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique.
How can we invest more in the sporting arena to bridge that gap for a lot of young people?
I think there should be more forums like this.
We need to find a way in which to combat that now.
Join us for the next Contributors Forum on Tuesday, January 8th, 2019 from 7 p.m. at the Crochet RC School in St. Andrew.
Welcome back. The Grenada Farm Labour Program has recorded a first since the program was conceptualized in the 1970s. For the first time, Grenadians will travel to Canada early in the year. A team of 24 will travel to Ontario on January 15th on a 2-year contract. This trip, according to the Labour Commissioner Cyrus Griffith, was rescheduled from November of 2018. Labour Minister Honourable Peter David encouraged the group during an orientation session on Friday to work hard and be ambassadors not only for their team but for their country.
Whatever you do, do it well. Because when you're doing that well, somebody watching you. So for example, you have an opportunity now, you're going to Canada, you're going to work on the farm. The person who you're working for will be looking at you, maybe needs somebody to stay up there permanently. If you're working well, you might say, yo, Jimmy, you're the guy. Well, if you're not working well, you'll be back. We send some guys sometimes, some of them do well, some of them don't. I'm asking you to do your best. You chose this. You decided, you came in, you made an application, and you're going out there for a year, and then you do well on the first year, you have a second year after that, after a vacation of 2 weeks. It is not easy work. I mean, I know it happened to go time, boy, this cold, I can't take this, but it is work. Godspeed, do well, do what you think is best for your family, for your country, and I wish you all the best.
The Grenada delegation will join other teams within the Eastern Caribbean and Latin American countries. And finally, the Royal Grenada Police Force is tackling head-on the reckless acts committed by some drivers on the nation's roads that contribute to an increase in vehicular accidents. On Thursday, the force held its first press briefing for the year, where ACP Jessamine Prince outlined plans to combat ills like inconsiderate driving, use of cellular phones, and alcohol consumption.
And I also want to hasten to say that we'll see some additional enforcement in the whole idea of road safety, and that is the use of the breathalyzer for persons who are driving under the influence of alcohol. That is in the law. We have never really done anything as it relates to enforcement in that regard, but in the not too distant future, we'll be seeing some enforcement as it relates to the use of breathalyzer for persons who are under the influence of alcohol while operating a motor vehicle. More and more we are seeing, when we investigate some of these accidents, we're seeing that a lot of our drivers lack the capacity to be tolerant and basically to be courteous. It sometimes requires some basic courtesies that need to be given. You have some cases where you may feel that, well, you may have the right of way, but because you anticipate that an accident is likely to happen if you proceed, you can stop and give that other person the right of way. Those little basic courtesies, we are not seeing a lot of that happening. There are some drivers who are very courteous. There are others, again, they just don't really care much. And I talked about that a few times before, where you'd find someone would just stop the vehicle in the middle of the road to engage somebody in a conversation on the other side, careless of who is behind.
ACP Prince said that the need for speed is unnecessary.
You have an operator who has a vehicle with 5 persons in it or 6 persons in it, and is driving on with a speed of maybe 80 miles per hour or 70 or 60 or even 60 miles per hour, and try to take a corner with that amount of speed. Obviously, he may lose control. And considering the road itself, I mean, our road is not the best. We know that there's a need for some serious infrastructural development on our roads. And again, we have to understand that, because it have some places in Grenada when you're driving, if you don't have nerve, you probably wouldn't even want to drive there. There are some people in Grenada who would not drive over Granada, and there are some people who not go on the western side, because you just imagine that you're driving on the road and you can just look and see the sea below, right, just on the side. Those are signs and indication that tells you that the road infrastructure is not one that you want to play with. So the need for speed and aggressive driving, we don't have the infrastructure for that.
That story just ended the national report for today, Friday, January 4th. Now to recap the top story. Government invites trade unions to continue pension negotiations. On behalf of all those who made this newscast possible, I am Rakisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, neighbor.
Here's the bill I asked you to pay for me.
How did you get your electricity bill to be so low?
For one, we size our transformers just for what we need. And we unplug transformers, chargers, and other devices when they're not in use. We also replaced our light bulbs with LEDs.
They burn less energy, right?
Much less. I even replaced the seal on my refrigerator door to keep the cold air in.
And Grenlec is always advising us not to open the fridge too often.
That's right. And my family washes and irons in bulk.
With fuel prices changing all the time, how do you know if it is working?
We pay attention to the usage history table. Over time, our average usage has decreased.
So while Grenada can't control fuel prices, I can conserve energy and save money.
Grenelec, energizing our Grenada.
Alrighty, we're back. Just before we get to Bishop Harvey, there are a couple of notes here. First of all, from Ryan. Ryan is referring to that newscast from the GIS, which spoke about driving conditions on the roads here. Ryan says you need strong nerves to drive on Grenada's roads. Boy, you need a heart of steel. And Laurie Bridgman says, George, the table turns round and round. The trade unions have to go through the court system in order to fight for what was rightfully the people's cry for better wages. Now, who the court is going to? Is it the same people in which they ruled against in favor of government? Okay, Laurie. And then she says here, the Toby place to try all matters is in the churches. The Toby place? The Toby place. I'm not sure. I don't get that. Anyhow, folks, let's move right along here now. Over the weekend, Bishop Clyde Harvey spent a few intimate moments with us, during which time he opened up his heart to the Grenadian people. From what I've heard thus far, he definitely moved persons who saw the piece. And for those of you who may not have seen it yesterday, I'd like to run that by you again this morning. It is also my fervent hope that those of you who watch this will not only watch, but listen. Listen to what the bishop had to say. Here we go.
Ever since I was a young seminarian, I've grown to know and love Grenada. I came here when Bishop Field was bishop, I think it was 1968, 69. And had a wonderful time between St. George's, Victoria, and Guave. Made some friends, and that has endured. And all along, as I watched Grenada go through its various crises, what has always struck me is a word which we use now, but even then it was true. The Grenadian people seem to be very resilient, They seemed to be very strong in their sense of principles. They demanded a lot of people, and in turn, the character of the Grenadian, both as an individual and as a society, constantly showed itself. I remember only too well the challenges of the 1979 events, which I was a young priest at the time. And I knew some of the history of that, and some of the history of that was that in the late 70s, a lot of young Grenadians came alive, partly through the church, with a desire to do the best by Grenada and to be the best they could be in the service of Grenada. That was the time of a document from Pope Paul VI called Populorum Progressio. The new name for development is peace. A new name for peace is development. And out of that came a commitment on the part of the church, especially for countries like ours, to really ensure integral human development, which is still a principle of Catholic social teaching. That it's not simply a question of people becoming more spiritual, but the human being is about more than just the spiritual, and that we have to try to develop every aspect of who we are as humans, as individuals, and as a society. So it was that foundation, I think, that contributed to what became the Grenada Revolution. And of course, in the mix, Marxist-Leninism came up, and that had its own problems. But I've always thought to myself, and some people disagree with me, that basically the commitment was right and the insight was correct. That people in a small island state like ours dared to dream a dream for themselves, that tried to see themselves as the masters of their own destiny. And I still believe in that basic sense that we are small enough to have a truly democratic society in which we acknowledge God and we also stand for the inalienable rights of every human being in the society. So over the years, I remained in touch with Grenada. I was in Trinidad, of course, active as priest. I'm not really wanting to go anywhere else. You know, that was part of the challenge of those days. And I think I did some good things in Trinidad. But of course, the world itself was developing in ways that we in our Caribbean region could not foresee. One of the things that I keep saying is that we have missed the boat on many occasions in Trinidad, and I suspect in other Caribbean islands as well. Elections give us an opportunity to dream again. And one of the things about the democratic process is that the democratic process should allow every dream to rise to the surface, especially around election times, and for people to be given some insight into what it might mean if we go in one direction or the next. Part of the problem, and it began in Trinidad when money entered into the political process in a powerful way, was when it was not a question of who could convince the people, but who had the most money to spend. And we see that very, very real in the American system today, and we have to be careful with that. But lest I seem to be delving only into the political, I want to make this very clear, that for me, anything that I have, any sense that I've developed about Grenada is not in the first place a political sense. It is a sense of who we are as a people and who we might be if we would just give ourselves a chance to be the best we could be. And that is where I think there is a link between religion and social life, which is powerful. Religion at its best is always about the fullest development of the human being. And therefore, anybody who is trying to be religious then has an obligation to seek what is best, not in the first place for himself or herself, but for the collectivity, the common good, as we say in Catholic social teaching. And that's part of what I see myself doing here. On the day of my ordination as bishop, I said the gift, one of the gifts I bring is the gift of the years of social teaching, which can be the foundation of a truly great society if people are trying to live it, the basic principles. So we have an opportunity, I think, in Grenada to come together and to try to build a society of which all of us can be proud. And that is not easy because you have a mass of people who may not necessarily believe the same thing, but a big, big part of it is, can we so encourage the debate and the questions that people will really see the range of possibilities, you know? It is, for me, one example of that is that I find it really weird that in a small society, which some years ago, thanks to the formal education, produced some very bright minds. And now you have a situation in which we're supposed to be going forward, but somehow we're failing in basic education. Literacy and numeracy are fundamental to any authentic education that a person might have. And I always find it sad when you realize that what has happened is that people have just forgotten, you know, what it means to really take your education seriously. We have become people who are more concerned about certification than about education, you know, and that's sad. So how do we correct that? I think, well, as bishop, I have a certain measure of control. I'm still trying to discover how much over our Catholic schools and what they teach, how they teach. And that's one area that I would like to put some focus into, so that our Catholic schools become not just schools that have the best certificate results, but that people are able to see out of longitudinal studies that we also produce some of the finest human beings that Grenada could ask for. That for me is a priority. It's a challenge. And we've begun to discuss what that will mean with those who lead our Catholic schools. That's one thing. The other question, which I raised in my Christmas message, is the quality of relationships among Grenadian people. There's some things that stand out in this society when you put it over and against the supposedly more developed societies, beginning with Trinidad. And that is that in Trinidad, you see people starving by the side of the road. You see people hungry and unfed. You see people who have no connection with the land. It struck me early on in my stay in Grenada, in my coming as bishop, that no Grenadian has to starve. Every Grenadian has some connection with some piece of land. Every Grenadian has the kind of connection that enables him, if he's lacking food in the town, to go in the country and get some. There is a sense that we are a small enough society and we know each other enough to really care for each other and to reach out to each other. And that is great. That must not be lost. That's one of the values that I'm clear that we must not lose. We must never become a society in which there are people who feel that they're starving. And out of that, they feel as if they're being taken advantage of and so on. The kind of thing that happens when somebody stops a car and says, hey, you know, and you talk to the fellow on the side of the road because you know him, rather than in some more developed societies where you're driving around with your car glass window up and you're afraid to talk to anybody. Beyond that, therefore, there is a sense that we have some fundamental relationships that we need to preserve and that we need to build on. How we do that. As a priest, there's one aspect of that which I think is very, very important, and that is our relationship with God. One of the things that has happened in a lot of so-called God-fearing societies is that people bow to God even as they lift themselves up. And that's a dangerous thing to be doing. I've been told over and over again in many of our islands, we believe in God here, we are a Christian society. But what does that mean? To what extent does our claiming to be a Christian society mean that we really are listening to the word of the Lord and we are really walking in righteousness and truth. When we look at the scriptures properly, one of the things that we find is that human beings are constantly being challenged as to their image of God. The God that they're praying to, the God that they're expecting to be part of their relationship. The Judeo-Christian scriptures are based on what we call a covenant with God. And that covenant means that God promises to be our God if we promise, and we try to promise, to be his people. Sin is when we fail in that promise, and we do that so often. But the real and one of the most difficult sins, if I might use that, put it that way, is when we presume that because we have made some kind of basic commitment, that God is always on our side, and that we can always say, God and I, God this and God that. But that is not necessarily so. God puts us in all kinds of situations, and he asks us whether we can respond to that out of the fundamental commandments to love God and love our neighbor. And the biggest enemy of that is our ego. And this is where a lot of Christian religion is compromised and even in some ways subsumed, because the ego gets in the way. And one of the things that psychology is showing us very clearly is that there are forms of narcissism which by their very nature exclude God. Because you look in the mirror and you think you're seeing God when in fact you're looking at yourself. How do we deal with that is a fundamental spiritual problem. And the ego can function at all kinds of different levels. Parents behave towards their children as if they're God. Teachers behave towards their students as if they're God. And they talk as if, you don't dare question me. And some parents now have the problem of walking with their children and the children bringing home homework that they know, the parents know, this is all wrong. The correction of my child's work is all wrong. And they don't dare go to talk to the teacher about it because the teacher believes that he or she, this is what. And one of the sadder things about education today, and I see it even here in Grenada, is that some of our best students are not becoming teachers. And this is why I have been very concerned about the teaching situation here, because you have to make teaching attractive enough to attract some of your best minds and people who will make a commitment to the next generation. If you have been a teacher, if you've been a student, and a country has educated you for 18 years, let's say 13 to 18 years, from age 5, it is not then for you to just take what you got and pack up and go. Some of us have to be able to make the commitments that we will pass on what has been given to us to another generation. So I cannot urge young people leaving school enough. Teaching may not pay all that much, but it is the noblest of professions. And of course, the society has an obligation to make sure that its teachers are always respected and honored. The teachers, in fact, have then to make themselves trustworthy and honorable people. So we have that great gift that is ours of dreaming of a different way of relating, of making sure that we come to genuine humility, because that is what it's all about. A genuine humility where we do not take advantage of other people. I said in a message the other day that there are some things that are definitely the work of the evil one. And I think we have to be clear about what those things are. In the realm of human relationships, manipulation and lies, those two things we have to try and eradicate from our social intercourse. Not easy, because very few people who are manipulating will admit that they're manipulating, and parents manipulating children won't admit that. There's a big difference between teaching your child how to live and manipulating your child to be the kind of person you want your child to be, as against the kind of person your child is created to be. to different things. That said, one of the things that has touched me in this new year is the New Year message of Pope Francis, in which he talks about good politics at the service of peace. It really is a wonderful message. Good politics at the service of peace. And he challenges the leaders of nations. He says, political office and political responsibility does constantly challenge those called to the service of their country to make every effort to protect those who live there and to create the conditions for a worthy and just future. If exercised with basic respect for the life, freedom, and dignity of persons, political life can indeed be an outstanding form of charity. That sentence alone is full of much to meditate on. But the heart of it is when he quotes a deceased Vietnamese cardinal who died in 2002, who composed what he called the Beatitudes of the Politician. And this is what he had to say. Blessed be the politician with a lofty sense and deep understanding of his role. Blessed be the politician who personally exemplifies credibility. Blessed be the politician who works for the common good and not his or her own interest. Blessed be the politician who remains consistent. Blessed be the politician who works for unity. Blessed be the politician who works to accomplish radical change. Blessed be the politician who is capable of listening. Blessed be the politician who is without fear. Powerful words. And then he goes on to say, sadly, together with its virtues, politics also has its share of vices, whether due to personal incompetence or to flaws in the system and its institutions. Clearly, these vices detract from the credibility of political life overall, as well as the authority, decisions, and actions of those engaged in it. These vices, which undermine the ideal of an authentic democracy, bring disgrace to public life and threaten social harmony. We think of corruption in its varied forms, the misappropriation of public resources, the exploitation of individuals, I use the word manipulation, the denial of rights, the flouting of community rules, dishonest gain, the justification of power by force, or the arbitrary appeal to raison d'etat, and the refusal to relinquish power. To which we can add xenophobia, racism, lack of concern for the natural environment, the plundering of natural resources for the sake of quick profit, and contempt for those forced into exile. This document is a very, very powerful reminder to us of some of the basic principles. But if I might return to a deeper space, if I might call it that, this is a nation that says it believes in God. And that is easy to say. It is much more difficult to live. I believe in God, I trust in God. But living up to what God asks of me is not always easy. In fact, when I come to those points where He is truly asking anything of me, it's hard. And so Grenada has this, it has taken on itself this great mantle of being a nation under God, ever conscious of God. And such a nation will have to ask itself serious questions, both based on the scriptures and on our human gifts of reason, as to what God asks of us today. We have to be honest enough to recognize the ways in which perhaps some of our plans are not what they ought to be. The church must understand that it cannot simply stay in the church, in the sanctuary, and leave the world to run its course. One of the challenges in any nation where Christianity is a dominant religion is how do we discern those who are genuine in their commitments to religion and Christianity and those who are simply using Christianity for their own ends. I hope and pray that as I continue to work with and to grow to love Grenadians, of all kinds, of all ranks, of all shapes and sizes, that I may be able to serve the greater good, the common good of a Grenada truly just, truly righteous, but also a Grenada in which everybody is recognized as equal before God and gains whatever he needs to flourish as a human being.
What else can I say? It's Bishop Clyde Harvey speaking with me over the weekend, with us, I should say, over the weekend. And as I mentioned, that was pre-recorded on Saturday afternoon. Now, we've gone over time, so please forgive me. And by the way, I do appreciate that you've taken some time off to spend an extra few minutes with us. On the shout box, some comments. Wayne Peters says, Bishop, where is Christmas in the Bible? Bishop, was Jesus born on December 25th? I don't know, Wayne. Ryan says, yes, Bishop Harvey. Religion and Christian theology emphasizes liberation from social, political, and economic oppression as an anticipation of ultimate salvation. Okay. He goes on to say, hence, the Latin American Roman Catholic liberation theology. Yes. Egotism excludes God. He also goes on to say, yes, Bishop, teaching is crucial in our society. Each one, teach one. Indeed, the evil one, Satan, is always there distracting the people. Our Pope is right to point out the voices of politicians. Yeah, Ryan. Then, comment here from Clive. Clive Devers. Hello, Clive. He says, not all, or may I say, it is now only a small percentage of teachers, nurses, doctors, lawyers, politicians are no longer following their professions with passion and common good. Priests, bishops, and religious followers, even radio broadcasters like you, George, and volunteers perform their services without any expectation of financial rewards. So says Clive. And finally, Margaret says, I think it is generally accepted that Christ was not born on December 25th. The date of his birth is totally irrelevant. What is important is that he was born. Yay, Margaret. If an individual doesn't want to celebrate Christmas, they don't have to. At the same time, don't judge those who do. Words of wisdom from Mo and Maggie out there in New York. Pilgrims, like I said, we have really gone over time this morning. It's coming up on 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thanks again so much for joining us. We're going to part, as always, with something inspirational. So, what is the challenge or frustration that you're facing today? Whatever it may be, I hope that today's reading will bring you some hope. It's a reading from the second book of Corinthians, chapter 4. Only 3 verses, 16, 17, and 18. I quote, Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 16 to 18. Final quick look at Facebook. Ashton Fletcher says, good morning again, George. Greetings from Louisville, Kentucky. Hey, horse racing place, eh? Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it for Georgie Porgy on this Monday morning. You have yourselves a great week. Spread the word around. You can like the live and also share it. And everybody will eventually know that we're out there, and hopefully we'll see some more people joining us in the coming days. Georgie Porgy sending God's blessings your way, and by his grace, let's get together again tomorrow morning at 9.